Welcome back to the Politics with Paul podcast. I'm your host, Paul Rader. Today's another special episode because, as you can see, we have another guest. In case you're new to the podcast, I take a completely nonpartisan, non-ideological approach to my podcast and the topics. I don't support or oppose specific people or groups. Fortunately, though, this topic is one that is not easily given towards such partisan or ideological considerations. And my guest today has some intriguing insights into that hot topic right now that's perhaps a little bit different from the usual fare in political discourse. And that is the newly released John F. Kennedy assassination files. Even though it's been over 60 years since JFK was shot dead in a Dallas motorcade at Dealey Plaza, the event captures the imagination of many Americans today, including us. And there is still plenty of mystery surrounding it, and that's partly why many conspiracies about the assassination still abound. Do these newly released files give us any more insight into what happened and why? Well, here to talk about that today is Jack Moore. Jack is a former prosecutor turned baseball pitching coach and host of his own podcast, More to Consider. He's passionate about history, constitutional law, and sports, which we'll get to a little bit at the end of today's episode, hint, hint. The JFK assassination, in particular, has been a lifelong fascination for him, and today he's going to cut into what these new files actually reveal, what's still missing, and why so many are misinterpreting their significance. So, without further ado, please welcome Jack Moore. Jack, thanks for being on the program today. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me on, sir. Greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely, and greatly appreciate you being here. So, I haven't had a chance to delve into any of these new files myself, and my memory's a little bit hazy on what exactly was already known, but let's get back to the beginning for you first, because as was said earlier, this has been a lifelong fascination for you. I find it fascinating too, of course, who doesn't? But what is it exactly that makes it so intriguing for you specifically, the JFK assassination?
So I grew up in Virginia. I grew up about 70 miles from Washington, D.C., and my father was military law enforcement. My mother was an x-ray technician. She went to the Medical College of Virginia. They met in Richmond, Virginia. I'm born a year and a half before the assassination. My mother was a big book reader, and I wouldn't say she was political, but she was into kind of pop culture and history, I think would be a good way of putting it. She votes for Nixon in 1960, and I think kind of falls in love with the Kennedy thing and really wants to see him win in 64. I believe she was somewhat emotionally shaken by his death. So she keeps all the magazines. She cuts out all, that's one thing I wish she hadn't. I have all of her newspaper clippings. I wish she'd kept the whole newspaper, right? But she clips everything. So I'm in a place where there's the Richmond Times-Dispatch. The Freelance Star was a newspaper in Fredericksburg, which used to, 50 years ago, nationally get recognition as one of the best kind of small town papers in the country. And we get the Washington Post. Washington Times wasn't a thing yet. So, we would see these newspapers, and she cut out all of these different articles relative to the assassination as it was happening. My grandmother kept the Life magazine, which I have a couple of now, the next week with Kennedy on the cover when they kicked the Roger Staubach cover to cover the assassination with printed frames from the Zapruder film that were black and white stills and not frame 313. None of the more grotesque things. It was just, some of the general frames from the assassination. So I see all this growing up. And I don't know, I'm this strange kid, 6 or 7, is trying to piece it all together. And one of the things that happened I wrote my master's thesis on it. And one of the members of my thesis defense team just turned 100 plus. He's always, he's like a month past 100. William Whitehurst, loved the guy, had him for several classes. He was in Congress for 18 years. And he's the only congressman to ever write, and he actually gave me signed copies. He's the only congressman to ever write a diary while in office. So he wrote 2 volumes, basically memoirs of what he went through. He was a World War II pilot and just a really neat guy. So,
yeah, no kidding.
I'm doing my thesis defense, which turned into almost like being around the dinner table with your favorite family members. Everything they had, I was pretty much had an answer for. So he goes, Jack, I read your thesis coming back from San Diego on a cross-country flight. I love it. I want you to get it published. And I goes, but one problem I had. I said, what's that, sir? He goes, you kind of hedge your bets at the end. You had Oswald doing it, then you kind of backed off. And I'm like, well, I think he did it. I'm just not sure why. And he was old school. He's a Republican, but he was old school establishment. Like, no, it was Oswald. He was just by himself. So he believed that. Then he asked me the question. He said, how on earth did you get involved in your quest for knowledge in this area? I'm like, well, I'm really embarrassed to say. And he goes, well, say. And I'm like, all right. My dad, who got drafted during the Korean War, did not serve overseas, but got started in the Army. He blows the lid off the IQ thing. They put him in OCS. He becomes an officer, resigns his commission, goes in state police school in Virginia, first in his class. While in the state police, one of his higher ups in the state police said, go back in the Army and go back in the reserves. And he makes full colonel eventually. And when he is a captain on his way to major, there's a snafu in his paperwork. And our local member of the House Representative, Herb Bateman, said, go talk to this person in the Pentagon. So we're 70 miles from D.C. So I still remember I'm in the back seat of a smoke-filled car. Everybody smoked then. Mom, dad are both smoking. And they both live past 90, by the way. But they're smoking. And I'm in the back seat of the car. And my mom is describing a book. And I'm fascinated by what she's saying. And the book is The Day Kennedy Was Shot by Jim Bishop, which I know to have been published in 1967. And the other thing I remember her saying is, let's go by Arlington. They've opened the gravesite to the public, which I looked up, and that was 1967.
Wow.
So born in April of 62, I'm either 5 or 6. I think I'm 6 because I think it's the next spring. But I remember those two discussions. So now I'm just fascinated. I think the next watershed for me was seeing the Zapruder film on TV. I mean, when Executive Action came out, it came out in the summer of 73, as I remember. And I was away on a family vacation or trip to see my grandmother or something. So it played in our local movie house and I had to see it. And it's, Mark Lane driven Executive Action, Will Geer and Burt Lancaster and these actors. So I don't see it until later. But in 75, I see Geraldo Rivera is going to, he's come out and said, we're going to show the Zapruder film. So he has Robert Groden, who's gotten a hold of a bootleg copy and done a lot of, visual enhancements to it. He's got on Dick Gregory, the comedian and activist. And when I see it, I can't sleep for 3 weeks. I had no idea what the headshot was going to be like. I had read a lot, and I knew what it was going to be. None of the autopsy photographs had come public yet. So you don't really know what that headshot's going to be like. And then all the people in the audience gasp. And now all hell breaks loose. So now people in Congress are like, whoa, the head went backwards. Now there's bootleg copies being shown around college campuses all over the country. And that pretty much leads to the House Select Committee on Assassinations. That end, you have the Church Commission and the Rockefeller committees, and you have all this congressional or Senate investigation. Church Committee, Rockefeller Commission. So they're in the mid-70s, and now they're finding out pretty clearly in D.C. at the Senate level that the CIA was enlisted the mob to kill Castro. And Allen Dulles, who sat on the Warren Commission, he never mentioned anything about that. So he dies in 1969. So all this nastiness is coming out, leads to the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which comes to the conclusion there is a conspiracy. They buy into the Dick DeBelt recording. They say there's a forced shot from the grassy knoll. Then this Harvard group studies it in 82 and said, nope, you got a timing problem. You have Sheriff Decker saying at the exact same time of these sound impulses, which are supposed to indicate gunfire. He's saying on to Parkland, on to the hospital. That's known to have happened 1 minute after the shooting. But, and I'll get into it, that shooting sequence does bring something about. In 1993, as I was finishing my thesis, I interviewed G. Robert Blakey. He was then he was on, and the last time I looked, I think he's still alive. I reached out to him a couple of years ago. Beautiful guy. He was very nice to me. But he was chief counsel of the House Select Committee on Assassinations. At the time I went to interview him, he was on the staff of the law faculty at Notre Dame. So I go out to South Bend. I'm not so sure he wants to talk at first. We ended up talking for 4 hours, and I get all this film over my shoulder. I got a camcorder pointed at him, and I have it all on tape. But he tells me an interesting thing. When the Warren Commission first sees the Zapruder film, and for your listeners, it's 486 frames. It is 8mm film. And it ran at a rate of 18.3 frames per second. So you have some timing confirmation possibilities. It is without sound. But what do we know? The famous frame 313 is the headshot. So there's not much doubt about that. So what Blakey said they did, which makes a lot of sense, is they said, okay, we have these 4 sound impulses, 3 which appear to be from the school book depository and 1 from the grassy knoll. Let's just take that last sound impulse and lay it on the headshot. Start working back. Guess what? Right around the time Kennedy raises his fist to his throat, that's another sound impulse. But what it made them do was look further back in the film than they ever had. The Warren Commission had assumed Kennedy's first reaction to headshot was around 5.5 seconds, and the whole shooting sequence had to take place in that time. Now, when you ask eyewitnesses, it's absolute. Who cares? I mean, they could say anywhere between 5 and 15 seconds for the shooting. But if the 3 shots had to be fired, crammed in at 5.5 seconds, the argument was it would have been difficult to do with this Italian bolt action rifle that the FBI said had a minimum fire. The minimum amount of time to fire the rifle, recycle and fire, was 2.3 seconds. So they're kind of jamming up 3 shots within that time. But now that they've gone 313, seen a sound impulse, they work back and they find the first sound impulse almost 8.4 seconds from the final. And they notice something. Connolly, who said, I look to my right over my shoulder on the sound of the first shot, starts looking. And a young lady, 10 years of age, Rosemary Willis, is all excited to see Jack and Jackie. She starts up on Houston Street. She's running with the motorcade. There is a end of the paved sidewalk into the grass that starts the infill there on that side of Dealey Plaza across Elm Street from the shooting side or from the school book depository side. And for some reason, right around frame 160, she stops and stares up at the school book depository at the building. When later asked, why'd you stop? She said, I heard a sound. Well, now we have a whole new timing situation. If it's possible that Dick DeBelt recording is accurate and did pick up sound impulses from gunfire, it kind of exactly matches what you see in the car on the Zapruder film, which now gives Oswald much more time. Having been at Dealey Plaza probably 20 times, the most shocking thing the first time I went was standing in that window and I'm like, oh my God, I could hit him with a rock and kill him from here. I had a gentleman on one of my shows the other day, marksman, military background. He goes, man, I just don't think anybody could do that. And I said, well, let me ask something. What do you think the headshot distance was? He goes, oh my God, 150, 200 yards. I'm like, 88. He goes, I'm sorry, what? And I was like, is 88. And I said, the first shot to the back, out the throat, single bullet theory, I believe, was 51 yards. And he goes, it was 51 yards. And I go, yeah. He had no idea how close that shot was.
Half a football field.
Exactly. And for a person who fired routinely, and Oswald's records would show he fired best in the kneeling position. They do this, across the stomach, kneeling, and all these standing. He was best in a kneeling position. He's got the box for support. That's what we assume. But we're talking about a guy that's shooting 100, 200, 400 yards in the Marine Corps who had a score of 212 and later 191, meaning he ranked in the middle and lowest tier of a Marine. He never qualified as expert. In his second qualification, the last on the way out, he had no real motivation. He's on his way out, but he fired a 191. So you're talking about a person with a high degree of training. He is of a particular age, 24. It's probably going to be highest, whatever motor skills, eyesight, whatever. But the biggest point I'm making is when you're there, you recognize that's not a difficult shot. And the timing does not press him to fire the shots at a much faster rate as many people believed. So that's just kind of where I am to the point of the time of Oliver Stone. So now I'm kind of into that time where Oliver Stone comes out, which I think is absolute trash, but I love Oliver Stone. I love Oliver Stone. I love that he served our country. I think he's the greatest movie maker ever. I think all that's great. But I think he's really stretching a lot of things in that movie for effect. God bless him. Wall Street's a great movie. Midnight Express is the first movie I ever saw from him. I'm like, whoa, this guy's good.
Yeah, I never saw the JFK movie he did, but I did remember looking up some of the reviews and was not looked kindly on in terms of historical accuracy. But
no, and I don't think, and he would say he didn't intend to do so.
Right,
that's not what he intended to do. Yeah,
gotcha. Yeah. I mean that's oh boy, that's a whole lot to unpack, and some of it I didn't know, some of it was just a refreshing of memory. So want to go back a little bit because you talked about in your thesis, and I believe it was Mr. Whitehurst you mentioned saying that you kind of hedged your bets on what you think actually happened. So prior to combing through these files, just to make sure I understand where you are with this, what were your opinions about the official story? Did you agree that with the Warren Commission that Lee Harvey Oswald, or on the basics such as Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone in shooting JFK, Jack Ruby acted alone in shooting Lee Harvey Oswald, the basics of it? Did you agree or disagree, or did you not necessarily have a strong opinion one way or another?
See, I guess the way I am is I will put out. Let me back up and say this. This is probably the best place to start. So at the time I wrote my thesis, and Whitehurst was saying, "Boy, I really want to see you publish it." Literally 2 weeks later, I saw Gerald Posner had written Case Closed. I am not Gerald Posner. I am not in any way, shape, or form saying that my thesis was case closed, not even close. But no one else had really said that. Jim Moore wrote Conspiracy of One a couple of years before, where he said, came to the conclusion it was Oswald. It wasn't as just, I mean, Jim Moore's book was great, but here I am writing a thesis, and they're wanting me to try to get it to the New Yorker. They're all talking these angles to try to get it published. I'm flattered, but my thesis advisor calls me and goes, "Mr. Moore, I would never question your integrity. But do you have any idea that Posner was going to come out with this book?" And I'm like, "No." And now I'm reading the reviews, and he's basically saying Oswald alone. And a big part of it was he really gives a great amount of analysis on why the single bullet theory works. And he gets into who the hell Lee Harvey Oswald really was from childhood on. He had a psychological review done in the city of New York when he was young, and it wasn't good. He had another one done by the Soviet Union, and they're like, "This guy's not of any value to us. He's too flighty. He's too crazy, whatever." So you have all that, but it doesn't mean he wasn't an asset of somebody. It doesn't mean he wasn't surveilled. Right. So we get through all that, but I was watching a story a few years ago, and it was probably 15 years ago. And I finally heard him say what I had always been thinking, but had never really properly expressed. He's being interviewed by someone, and he goes, "What are the dynamics of the Kennedy assassination?" He goes, "Oh, well, it's two major churches, and these are churches. And you will be kicked out of the church for heresy. You can't say certain things." And
Right.
he goes, "The first church is the Church of the Grand Conspiracy. And its high priest is Mark Lane. And one of its greatest disciples was Oliver Stone." He goes through the list. And he goes, "They are of the, if there's any tiny thing that can't possibly be to 100% certainly explained, it's a conspiracy." Of course, that's because it's a
Right.
conspiracy. And
Even
he goes,
things
"But
that
then,"
are 100% explained sometimes.
right. And then he goes, "But then there's the Church of the Lone Nut." And he goes, "That's Vincent Bugliosi." And he says Gerald Posner. And again, I think this is kind of unfair to Posner. I'm a fan of Posner because I think he's just being straight down the middle. He's saying what he's saying. He is a journalist and a lawyer, and I don't think he has an axe to grind. I think he's just saying this is where the weight of the evidence is. Vincent Bugliosi, I definitely think, with Reclaiming History, was taking a lot of stabs at the conspiracy side, but I think he had a lot of points. He too was a prosecutor, famously, Charles Manson. But, prosecutors look at things a little bit different way for sure. And you are an advocate. When you're an advocate, you push one particular side of the issue. So this gentleman says, Church of the Lone Nut, Church of the Grand Conspiracy. He goes, "But there is a middle lane, and that's Oswald did it, and we don't know who he did it for." Now, I'll go ahead and cut to this story too. I'm coaching college baseball. I was actually coaching college baseball, went to law school, practiced, and went back to baseball. I'm coaching again now. So I played college baseball, always been involved with baseball. But got a friend of mine, she's an athletic trainer. And she goes, "Hey," I love Dallas. Any excuse to go to Dallas, I'm going to go. So she said, "Hey, there's a big convention of all of us athletic trainer types. You want to go to Dallas?" And I was like, "Yeah, what the hell? We'll drive." So we drive to Atlanta, drive to New Orleans, on to Dallas. So I drop her off at the front door of whatever this convention hall is, 8 a.m., and I head to Dealey Plaza. I'm going to have fun on Dealey Plaza, right on the grassy knoll. So I go to the grassy knoll, and a guy comes running down with a suit on. He's got a suit on. He comes running down, and I don't know why he just comes straight to me, and he goes, "Hey, who do you think did it?" And I'm like, I'm one of those crazy people think Oswald did it. He goes, "Come with me." So we go up on the hill. The guy's got the money changer belt. He's got all these magazines strapped to him, and He's got 14 shooters from 39 locations, and he's doing his thing. So we argue with him, and we pull away, and the guy says, hey, you really know your stuff. Well, what's your story? And I'm like, well, I just wrote a master's thesis. And I said, you too, what's your history? And he goes, well, I'm from Northern Virginia. I'm like, I'm from Virginia. And he goes, really? And I go, yeah, I grew up between Richmond and DC. He goes, well, I'm from Northern Virginia. My daddy's somebody. It's exactly what he says. He's like, and my daddy's somebody. And I'm like, and he goes, well, when the House Select Committee on Assassinations, began in the mid to late 1970s, Daddy made some calls and got me a position as a page when I was 19. I'm like, cool. What are you doing tomorrow? And I'm like, I got the car. I'm taking my friend, dropping her off. Let's go around. So the famous backyard photograph on Neely Street with the staircase behind, we went pulling up in that yard and filmed the backyard. And the staircase is still there where Oswald had the photographs taken. We pulled right in. We go to 1026 North Beckley, his room and house. We go to, we just do all this in a day. I've got my car. I'm riding around neighborhoods. And these aren't the best parts of Dallas, believe me. We go down to Jefferson Boulevard and we find the Texas Theater where he was arrested. Now, when we're there, there has been a lot of cleanup because Oliver Stone came in 91 and made everything as 1963 as he could. The first time I was in Dealey Plaza in 1990, it was a mess. Like there was like 18 inches of grass up against the grassy knoll. Against the picket fence. It was a mess. So when I came back in 92, very cleaned up. Now I'm back in 94. So I made 3 trips in those 2 years, or between 1990 and 1992. I'd been there 3 times. So we ride over to Jefferson, see where Oswald's arrested. Then we come back to the city police headquarters where there's now a law school. But this is the basement of the building where Oswald shot. So this he knows no strangers. He fears nothing. So we go in there. There's a couple of 20-somethings in there with firearms, badges. They're Dallas city police working in this building. He goes running up. He goes, hey, there's some famous things happen here, right? And these guys probably were born around 1970, which would make them about 24 at the time. And they're like, yeah, we've heard the stories. Like some Oswald character, like, yeah, you want to see everything? And they're like, what do you mean? And he goes, we get on that elevator. So we get on the elevator that you famously see Oswald come off of. We get on it. And these guys are like, show us everything. So we go to the 4th floor, the 3rd floor where there was the homicide detective's office. If you saw on the night of the shooting, Oswald, when he's asked a question, have you been charged with shooting Prague? No, I've not been charged with that. No one said that until I heard it in the hallway. You remember that whole thing? We're in that room with the lineup wall, which is like a closet. I can't believe they got all these people in that room. So we go bouncing all around, go down to the basement where he shot. We're telling these young kids everything that happened there. They're high-fiving us. They're having a blast. Go out to the car. I'm driving him back to Dealey Plaza, and he said, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? You want to give me a ride to the airport so I don't have to get a cab? I'm like, sure. So I drive him to the airport. He says he's a pilot for American Airlines. He reaches in the back and grabs his American Airlines garment bag. And I can still see, it's one of those moments you can see the rest of your life. I'm in the front seat of my 1991 Honda Prelude with a spoiler on the back. It's a pretty cool car. So I kind of lean over the front seat and I'm like, hey, dude, I might not ever see you again, which I have not. And I said, tell me what I'm not going to find out for 50 years. And he leans back in the car and he goes, hey, dude, Oswald did it. I saw everything. And I'm like, okay. And I said, so what's the problem? He goes, who he did it for. And I went, all right. He goes, he's dirty government intelligence from top to bottom. That's what they're hiding from you. And now as the years have passed, I haven't ever really seen anything that would kind of discredit that take. But what he was adamant about, he goes, hey, all these multiple shooters, it's bullshit. He goes, no, Oswald did it. Oswald fired the shots with that rifle.
No grassy knoll.
No. And I never believed that. And, when I was 16, I probably believed it. But the thing that really put me over the top when I was writing my thesis, actually in somewhere, I think up here among my books, somebody came out with the screenplay of the movie JFK, and it's annotated. There's all these footnotes, and at the very back of it, there is a lot of articles, just one after the other, chronologically in time, about things that people wrote about. And like they get into the fact that the 3 tramp argument, which It's funny, Oliver Stone actually runs the three tramp argument as CIA types or whatever. They're being taken from that railroad car. But at the time these men were arrested, they were arrested and released for vagrancy. Then somebody does a deep dive kind of discovery in the Dallas police headquarters, and they go through the paperwork and they find the three arrestees. They find who they are. And they go to West Virginia and they find one of the three. And they're like, tell us your story. He goes, yeah. He goes, the reason we were in better shape that day is we'd all been to a YMCA the night before, got a chance to shave and got a rack bed, a bunk to stay on. And then we were out the next day trying to travel to wherever else, and we get picked up after the shooting. We knew nothing about it. And they were brought in and released. And there were three names, and they were given, and they turned out to be actually factually people that were just actually like hobos at the time. So that was one of the things that was interesting. And there was an article among the articles in the back from a guy who was a UCLA medical school graduate. He got called to the House Select Committee on Assassinations to be on a panel to get into different aspects of the shooting. And he was on the panel covering the wounds to Connolly. What happened to John Connolly? And did the single bullet theory make sense? And he said the first thing that stood out to him was Connolly's wound. Clearly, you could see it in the clothing, and you could see it in the scarring of his back, was an 1.25 inch long missile that was in yaw. It was turning end over end. So you have to ask yourself, if Connolly doesn't have the general neat and circular entry wound that generally would happen with the bullet that hasn't struck something else, he doesn't have that. He has a tumble. So if he has a wound, this sort of this position, not that position, why? Had to pass through something. In 2013, on the 50th anniversary of the Kennedy assassination, you may have seen it was a father-son team that they brought out to do a bunch of ballistics tests on Oswald's rifle. I'll ask you, firing into pine board, what level of penetration do you think that bullet would achieve in testing?
Oof. I am by no means a ballistic expert, so I'm not even sure how to answer that question.
No, I'm just saying, I'm not trying to I'm not trying to stump you. I'm just asking, because people are shocked. I've seen it done twice. One of them was they took a pine log, fired, x-rayed, found it, cut right in, pulled the bullet out. What these gentlemen did in 2013 is they took a ton of inch boards, just a ton of them, and put them out, and they taped them together. They fired, and it was like, cut the tape, look up, there it is. And we found it. And it was in a particular board in the sequence. So I'm just asking, what would you guess that type of Carcano rifle with full metal jacketed military round 6.5 with a muzzle velocity of roughly 2,100 feet per second, how much wood of pine board do you think it would penetrate? I've seen anywhere between 36 and 42 inches.
Inches.
Wow. And what happens, do you think, when they separated those boards and pulled the bullet out? What do you think it looked like? Pristine.
Okay.
There wasn't a mark on it.
Oh, wow.
So it's I believe it's the Geneva Convention of 1922, following World War I, they came up with the idea, because, you've probably seen the amount of amputation done in the American Civil War. They're firing 58 to 75 caliber soft lead bullets. It could hit you in the bicep and blow off your arm. I mean, once it fragmented, it would take out your whole arm. And they had to amputate a lot of people because of so much destruction done from soft lead bullets. So in the Geneva Convention of 1922, I believe it was 22, they come out with, let's make metal jacketed rounds. The idea is less likely to do the human deformity that the soft lead bullet will do. It will wound rather than maim or kill, but it will wound someone. And now you're tying up two guys to get them off the field. It's two less combatants. So it's crazy to think that in war, you're talking about trying to clean up war a little bit to make it a little bit nicer. But that's what the metal jacketed bullet's designed for. So even when they start to test Oswald's rifle, you can see it in the literature, in the Warren Commission. The FBI didn't even have test ammunition to compare it to, because your average Joe on the street isn't taking a military round type of weapon and firing at people. It's generally going to be garden variety, other type of bullets. Not that there's not metal jacketed bullets or metal tip bullets and things, but this type of actual military round, especially in the 6.5 millimeter, is like crazy rare. It's like roughly 26 caliber. So I'm looking at 90% of what I see online, our shows, on, one of the major networks, you constantly hear people like, well, I know one thing, bullets don't pass through humans and into other humans. And I'm like, based upon what? I was like, why is it you think that a bullet couldn't pass through soft tissue of Kennedy, not strike bone and pass out of his throat into the air, tumble, and then hit something else?
I remember seeing something. I can't remember what show it was, but talking about basically the evolution of firearms and like the one that killed Abraham Lincoln, and just how, like you said, how fragmented and lodged it would get. But then obviously as time went on, these however they tested it, the more modern firearms, the bullet just goes right through like it's basically butter.
Yeah, and so another interesting thing, I know I'm throwing a lot out there, but
No, it's all good.
But a key thing is once you accept the single bullet theory as being not only likely but probable, now you're down to, yes, Oswald could have and probably did it. Now, you mentioned like the grassy knoll earlier. Okay. One of the things I always found fascinating is the proximity, again, when you're there. So I had a friend of mine say, hey, next time you're there, stand on Zapruder's pedestal, stand on it, look to your right, look to your right. And I went, oh my gosh, like the picket fence is like 45 feet away. Marilyn Sitzman, you can find it on YouTube. She was a 31-year-old receptionist who tragically was terrible. I mean, I feel bad. I mean, she seemed like a lovely lady. She passes of cancer in her 60s. And in the 1990s, as Oliver Stone's JFK is coming out, she gets interviewed and then passes of cancer not long after. So she's gone from 31 to about 61, 62 at the time. And they asked her the questions, and she said, yep, Mr. Z came in that morning. Where's your camera? And she's like, you're going to regret it. Go back and get your camera. He loved to film things, goes back, gets the camera, comes out, and he has vertigo. He has an unsteadiness. And I'm telling you, I'm not much on heights, but I don't like heights anyway. But that is not an easy pedestal to stand on. What I can't believe is how he just continued to film and didn't fall apart, and drop the camera. But anyway, they go there together. And he's looking around and he goes, what about here? And she goes, are you going to be okay on that? He goes, could you stand up here, honey, and hold me? Yes. So she goes, I'm behind him, holding him as he's filming. She goes, I only remember shot 2 and 3. She said, I where was it coming from? Behind me somewhere, meaning school book depository. So when you're at that angle and you're angled towards Elm Street, the school book depository, 12 o'clock straight ahead, you're talking about somewhere around 8:30, 8 o'clock-ish. If you're standing in that position. So if directly ahead where the headshot occurred is 12 o'clock, school book depository is going to be, it's going to be behind 9 o'clock. It's going to be over in there. But then when you look over here at 4 o'clock-ish, 3 to 4 o'clock-ish, where you're going to have this, where the picket fence is. So they said, the shooting sequence starts. She goes, I saw his head explode at the end of the frame 313. She doesn't realize that's the frame, but she's like, wow, oh my God, his head just exploded. We're all speechless. We can't move. We can't really function.
Yeah.
And then they said, and then you heard a loud sound. She goes, yeah, they dropped a Coke bottle. So somebody dropped a Coke bottle right up on that concrete area where the steps are down to the street. And she goes, that basically woke me up. Then the reporter, or whoever it is interviewing her, said, did a shot come from the grassy knoll? Did a shot come from the picket fence? She goes, absolutely not, unless they had some type of silencer. Well, people that know weapons know they're suppressors. They don't silence the shot. So from that type of area. Now, if you say that in certain company, they're going to go, yeah, that's because she was a CIA plant. They're the lie. I mean, okay, so now, she's CIA and that's why she's covering. She seems like a pretty sincere lady saying nobody shot from that side. So the other big key thing for me, and this is about the time I was doing my thesis, is that in 1993, the American Bar Association decides to do a mock trial of Oswald. And they go to a group called Failure Analysis out of Seattle. And these cats throw stuff into the computer animation of the time, and then they can spin things around in a computer animation. So to do the Kennedy assassination, they found a model, 6 feet, 1/2 inch, like Kennedy, 6'3" plus, like Connally, and they set them relative to their actual positions. This is another part that really kind of pissed me off as I started to really investigate this. When you see the movie JFK, and you know the Seinfeld connection, right? Do you know this? Yeah.
The magic
So,
loogie, yeah. Keith
yeah, the
Hernandez.
same, and right, and it's the same actor though. The one Wayne McKnight, he is in JFK playing the front guy, playing Connally, and then the magic loogie, he's playing Connally basically.
Yeah.
And Kramer becomes Kennedy with the head snap up.
I'm hit.
But so as soon as that, when I was watching Seinfeld, and that, I was like, oh no, they're not doing this. And then they start doing the grainy.
Yeah.
They're doing, and it's Roger McDowell, the pitcher's the one that's spitting off the, yeah. But when they started to do that, I'm like, this is some of the best TV comedy ever. Even though it's a tragedy.
Keith Hernandez.
And I looked it up, and actually the Mets didn't play that day. The day he said June 6, 1980. Yeah, they actually didn't play that day. That's probably why they picked that day. But anyway, in the movie JFK, it's interesting. They give a 6-shot scenario. And in that 6-shot scenario, I was actually running a college course. I run it. It's like an errant shot into Kennedy, second shot into Kennedy, another errant shot, and then, eventually the headshot. But there's one shot, and Costner, as Garrison says, and this is a shot that struck Connally, causing all of his wounds. Right? Watch it in JFK. It says that. So I asked the students, I'm like, hey, what's wrong with the single bullet there? Impossible, Mr. Moore. And I said, okay, what did he just say were Connally's wounds? Because when he did the in court, it was this way and out of the car and waiting a couple of seconds and coming back and hitting him in the wrist. He's got the bullet doing all kinds of crazy things in the courtroom sequence when he's got the 2 models. But when he's doing the 6-shot scenario later in the movie to the jury, what actually happened, he has 1 bullet hitting Connally, doing all the wounds. So I'm like, so kids, what's the difference? The only difference is minus Kennedy. He has the bullet doing the same thing. Oliver Stone's got the bullet doing the exact same thing, but earlier in the courtroom sequence where he has the 2 models, he's got it zigzagging all over the place. So back to failure analysis. Failure analysis takes the Kennedy model, the Connally model, and one of the big lies that have been perpetrated to me from the movie JFK and everything like it was they have Kennedy dead head center to Connally and at the same height in a chair the same height. If you see the back door open of the limousine after the shooting, there's blood everywhere. It's an awful scene. But you see that the jump seat is in the floor. The jump seat is easily 6 inches below, and it's inboard because it's running out from the passenger seat. They took a 1961 Lincoln, that presidential Lincoln model 1961 Continental was cut in half and sent to another manufacturer who lengthened the car by 2.5, 3 feet and put in the jump seats. So they made it this presidential limousine. They added later all types of, things about from, a grenade underneath, all kinds of metal, what would you call it? They added more protections to the vehicle than first existed. It was pretty much just a 61 model Lincoln that had been extended with the bubble top that was plastic and not bullet resistant, or it wasn't anything really for protection except for the rain or for inclement weather. But I've been hearing for years they're exactly the same height, one dead center in front of the other. Now I find that Kennedy's seat is higher, Connally's is lower and inboard. So now I'm looking at a right to left shot, striking Kennedy, coming out the throat, moving at a downward angle. You've got Connally saying that he turned to the right in the seat and then came back to his left. And when he started to turn around, he perfectly aligns this alignment of wrist, armpit, chest. He perfectly aligns it. But here's the key thing. When they're going frame by frame and saying, okay, Jimmy playing Connally and Timmy playing Kennedy, yep, move a little bit here, get exactly positioned, next frame. Then they kept moving them so they could then feed this information into a computer from all these scans of the body and then be able to run models like a Zapruder film and then see it from 360 from any angle. Something happened, though, as they were doing this. No one in 30 years, from 1963 to 1993, had discovered or noticed at frame 224, the Zapruder film, frame 224, Connolly's lapel flies off his chest 6 inches. So you can see in viewing the film, frame by frame, there's a V with the grayness of the tie, and all of a sudden it's covered with a big puff. Take a guess what that is. That's the bullet passing through his chest.
Oh, wow.
So even though Connolly in the 60s looked at all the frames with Life magazine, he assumed because his cheeks puffed out and there was like a look of distress, his hair becomes disheveled. He thinks he's hit around 240, as other researchers thought. But this moving of the lapel is an absolute timing confirmation of when the bullet strikes him. Regardless of what he thought, this is it. What's happening at the exact same time? Kennedy's wrist come up in a ball fist. So I have it on a loop, I don't have it here for you now, but I have it on a loop that I used to show my class where a guy had put together frames 220 through 230. And I would ask my students, train your eye between the two of them. Just kind of train your eye, watch it looped over and over. And you see this, you see this, you see this, you see this. And when you watch it in a loop, you can't help but go, son of a gun. Kennedy's raising his arms at the exact same time that Connolly's lapel's flying off his chest. So I have a bullet passing through Kennedy. I have a bullet hitting Connolly that's in yaw. In the 2013 testing, every time they fired through ballistic gelatin, the bullet out into the air began to spin end over end every time. Not one time, 3 times, every time. So you have a keyhole entry to Connolly's back. You have the type of damage in Connolly's body that is consistent with the bullet that's decelerating. So another important key, this stuff drives me mad. There is a part of the Warren Commission where they take that rifle and fire directly into the wrist of a human cadaver and they mushroom the bullet. And I have seen this a million times. The Kennedy people for conspiracy or Oswald could look at that. That's absolute confirmation. The bullet's destroyed. And I'm like, yeah, if you took a bullet and fired it directly into the wrist, not having turned end over end or passed through 2 bodies yet, that might be the result you get. So another doctor testified before the House Select Committee. They said, okay, doc, tell us about the bullet. Tell us about what happens. And he said, at the highest velocity, if that bullet hits dense enough bone, you get the headshot. And it's called failure of the jacket. The jacket fails. It becomes destroyed. And then you get a sea of soft lead throughout the wound. You see a constellation almost of lead in Kennedy's head. Because when it entered the back of the head, it failed the jacket. Now the soft core of lead gets thrown out throughout his brain and throughout the exit wound. But he said, this bullet in flight, muzzle velocity 2,100 feet per second. When it struck Kennedy, 1819. It's going to be some level of deceleration as it reaches the street. Now it hits Kennedy, comes out of his throat. I'll take a guess, 1,550, 1,600 somewhere. But it's down 500 feet per second from out of the gun or out of the rifle. So now it's out in the air and it's tumbling. As it's tumbling, it hits Connolly. It creates that oblong wound. Now it's like a little buzzsaw working through his chest. It breaks 5 inches of his 5th rib. Now it's out into the air with a 2-inch hole blown out the front of his chest. That's a little it's an 1.5 inches or 1.25 inches bullet out there spinning out of his chest. Strikes the wrist, lodges in the thigh. And they said, Doc, what does all that mean? And he said, here's what it means. If you fire that bullet at maximum muzzle velocity into bone, it will fragment bone, destroy, crack, destroy bone, and fragment the bullet, most likely do great deformity. But if you slow the bullet down enough, it does less deformity to the bullet and it breaks bone. And he goes, if you decelerate it enough passing through an object or body, it will bounce off bone. So in the end, they're like, did that bullet act in what's been described as Connolly's wound consistent with that bullet? He goes, absolutely. If you take the bullet and you go through the different levels of deceleration and into the body. And I'm like, that makes sense to me. It makes sense to me. And the part I can't get around, I can't unsee, is Kennedy reacting and the bullet coming off or the bullet passing through the chest at just the same time. So that all says, I think Oswald did it. He did it with that rifle. And there was no one on the grassy knoll. There's no frontal shooter. And my God, most every show I have a friend I have to argue with all the time. William Greer, the driver, did not turn around the car and shoot him. You've probably heard that one, haven't you?
Yeah.
Have you? Yeah. All that is the sunlight reflection off of Roy Kellum and the other agent's head in really bad fourth and 15th generation copies or whatever they are of the film. But if you look closely in the best frames from the best resolution of the film, Greer's both of his hands are on the steering wheel. But I've heard it all. Jackie shot him. Greer shot him, and they got George Hickey, the follow-up Secret Service agent, who did pull out an AR-15, and they thought he fell back and shot, and that was the headshot. So all of this is to say there's all kinds of theories on how the shooting happened. None of them hold water, so we have to clear the decks on that and then decide, okay, if Oswald did it, then why? That becomes the big why. And I'm all open for that.
Yeah. I'm sure there's people that I don't know if I've actually heard this, but I'm sure people are like, Abraham Zapruder shot him too, probably.
Well, they do get into why was he there. Oh yeah,
okay.
I've heard the whole. Yeah, he was a plant. Oh, funny how he didn't bring his camera then, didn't? Funny how, like I said, he pulled it off without a hitch. He didn't move. Yeah, what's up with that? And then, of course, the granddaddy of them all is how much the film's been altered. It's supposed to have been altered. Yeah.
Did they even have the capability to alter the film considerably back then?
It's funny you say that, because I was listening to a guy one time who was a film expert. I'm watching a show like ours. I'm watching this guy, and he was saying that it's the stupidest thing he's ever heard of. 1963, they would be able to do, the Star Wars type of thing, from 15, 16, 18 years later, that what you're seeing in film with special effects, they couldn't do it then.
Yeah.
And of course, the response of the guy that wants to push it is like, well, what about the CIA? You don't think they already had that technology? So, the film guy is like, I don't think it existed. But the other guy, his response is, yeah, but you don't know about those crazy guys at the CIA,
Well, it's you always got to find a way to, say, but hey, maybe we don't know if they, what they have. And then, they, to keep the whole idea alive. Yeah. I mean, some people are just going to, just like in politics in general, some people just going to want to believe what they want to believe. I do want to move a little bit more specifically on the newly released files, and I don't know how much time you have for this. So,
well, okay. I just said the big thing I'd say right now is I've watched Stone, I've seen Jefferson Morley, I've seen some of the guys that are big in this, and all they keep saying, and again, God bless them, God bless all these people that are pushing for the truth, because I really believe that they are. But all they seem to keep saying is there's another smoking gun we haven't seen. And I remember early on, it was Gerald Posner. Gerald Posner got interviewed as soon as all this broke. As soon as Trump put ink to paper, they're like, what do you think? He goes, I think this is going to happen with newly released files. The people that think grand conspiracy are going to go, aha, see? Or it's not going to be very supportive of it. They're going to go, yep, they continue to hide it, or they destroyed it. And then the people who think Oswald alone and nothing more are going to go, see, it's a nothing burger. There's nothing there to see. And right. I agree with that. I don't think there's ever going to be any clear resolution. And I think some people that are commentators have made a great point. Do you really think the CIA left a note? We shot JFK 11/22/63, 12:30 Central Standard Time. Make this top secret. Who came out with that memo? That memo doesn't exist. But I do think what we're finding is what they've been covering is the James Jesus Angleton, the double agent guy that was always looking for, moles in the CIA, people that potentially could have been double agents, that kind of thing. The fact that he's reading Oswald's mail in 1959, the fact that they're following him around, the fact that he's not apparently the only military type who's being trained to go to the Soviet Union and live. I really don't know what Oswald is. His brother Robert said, and I think you may know some of the history on this, and I can never remember the name. There was the gentleman Philbrick, who in the 50s had been he'd been a communist type who sees the light, and then he infiltrates the Communist Party, and they do the famous television show, I Led 3 Lives. So Lee Harvey Oswald was born in 1939. So that kind of mid-50s television show, I Led Three Lives, the infiltration of the Communist Party by an FBI hero, an American hero, FBI type. That's his favorite show. But they say he is also, while in New York, highly politicized by the Julius and Ethel Rosenberg execution. Somebody on the street hands him some paperwork, and that's got him being Joey Marxist. And then, he's from one thing to the next. What his brother Robert says is he's just an anti-whatever. And no matter what you do, he's going to be the other side. And in his mind, he's playing super agent guy. He's James Bond in his mind. And then there's a question of, I think his IQ score was 119. He wasn't stupid by a long shot. But then people ask the question, okay, he really taught himself Russian, one of the more difficult languages to learn. Did he really do that? He's at Asugi Air Base in Japan, where they're flying the U-2. Now, I think a lot of researchers have said the Francis Gary Powers being shot down in 1960 and breaking up the potential for Khrushchev and Eisenhower to have a summit, and that destroyed that, was not Oswald. Oswald didn't give up some kind of secrets. As a matter of fact, one take that I've heard from the Soviet Union's position, but of course it's the Soviet Union, but one of the positions I've heard is when Oswald came in saying, I want to, be with you guys and I'm anti-America, they were asking him questions, and all he was saying was things they knew 14 years prior. He didn't have anything new. Even his position as Marina at Asugi Air Base, he didn't have some kind of super special knowledge that they didn't already know. So the argument goes, while he's in Moscow, that first shot he takes, he gets rejected, does the cut the wrist, kind of acts like he's trying to take himself out, which they think was a half-ass effort and just either a cry for help or he knew how to manipulate people. So there's a calling of the higher ups, like, all right, what the hell are we going to do with this guy? He's going to be a major publicity black eye for us. Send him to Minsk, put him in that radio factory out there, screw it, get him 400 miles away and just leave him out there. And that's what they do. They just do that to appease him. Now he finds that super communism isn't great in Soviet Union. When he comes back to America, it's Uncle Fidel. Fidel's doing it better. He's got a better version, whatever. And it comes down to the Mexico City trip 6 weeks before the assassination. Did he really make that trip? If he's really down there, what's his connection to Sylvia Duran? Did he make some comments about killing Kennedy? Did he meet with this, they call, the wet operations guy from the Soviet Union that handles assassinations in the Western Hemisphere? Blah, 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 blah. But the CIA was clearly tracking him. Another important point about the Warren Commission, there was a great book that came out, Philip Sheehan, that was a New York Times writer, wrote Cruel and Shocking Act, which was the language of the opening of the Warren Commission. He does a book on the 9/11 Commission. And somebody, whatever book publisher came out and said, hey, why don't you do one on the Kennedy assassination? He goes, too many times. No. Do it on the Warren Commission. And I think one of the last junior members of the staff, the council, said, we want our story to finally come out, what we know. And this is 10 years ago on the 50th anniversary. Anyway, it's a great book. And one of the things that's interesting it opens with is there was a well-run around Texas rumor in the days following the assassination that Oswald had a pay number and an identifying number with the FBI. So Wagner Carr, who was the Attorney General of Texas, supposedly called J. Lee Rankin, the chief counsel, to the Warren Commission and said, hey, you guys got a problem there in D.C. you need to look into. It's like, what's that? He goes, Oswald might have been FBI. Like, oh, hell. So Earl Warren calls an emergency meeting, and Sheehan opens his book with this story. I think it's kind of comical at the same time as quite disturbing. So Earl Warren was a World War I veteran. He was a governor of California during World War II. Considered very he's considered very conservative. And then Eisenhower names him to the Supreme Court, or nominates him for, and he becomes the Chief Justice in 1953, and then goes kind of way left. And then a lot of things he does, and Eisenhower is supposedly like, oh my God, it's the worst decision ever made to put Earl Warren on the Supreme Court. But he's kind of loved by everybody. He's a grandfatherly type, and he's got a certain worldview of the United States. And he's not the three-letter agency type of guy. He doesn't have that kind of background. So the story goes, He comes in and says, hey, folks, all you guys on the Warrant Commission, there's a little story going on about Lee Harvey Oswald and the FBI. So here's what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to give J. Edgar Hoover a call. We're going to bring him in, put him under oath, and ask him some questions. And they say Dulles like slaps the table and starts laughing. He goes, I ain't going to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And, then Earl Warren's like, I'm sorry, what was that? And he was like, what do you mean you're going to bring Hoover in? If he's a good agent, he'll lie. And Earl Warren is like, I'm sorry, is a former CIA director telling me that an agency head would lie? And Dulles like, I know I would. He just like flat says to him, he goes, no, if you're a good agency guy, you protect the agency. Damn right I'd lie to this commissioner or anything else. So it's interesting that Dulles is on the Warren Commission, and he knows that the CIA had enlisted the mob to kill Castro. You think he ever brings it up? Do you think that's pertinent? Do you think you maybe want to raise your hand and go, guys, I think there's something. We closed door secret session, but I think we need to address the fact it could have been Castro. It could have been retaliation from Cuba.
Right.
Now, I do also believe throughout the last 60 plus years, there is a lane and an argument that there is a nobleness to, or at least a practicality to lying and covering up. I mean, there could have been a bunch of these guys in the room with all their different intelligence takes, and they could have been like, you know what? This is Castro, or this was the Soviet Union. And we let Joe Q. Public, we're into World War III. So then tens of millions of deaths later, we can say, yeah, they needed to know. Or we can lie to them and just say it's Oswald and keep world destruction, out of the news. If you told me that a bunch of people in power in the U.S. government lied to the American people to avert World War III, I'd be like, yeah, I get it. Right?
Yeah.
I don't think it was worth World War III. I really don't. I mean, I understand why they might have taken that position. But the fact that they may have been complicit in setting up the tumblers to make this happen is another whole issue. The fact that you're out screwing around trying to kill Castro and his blowback, that's another one you don't really want to explain to the American people.
Yeah.
And another thing about all this stuff coming out from the agencies and explanations. You may remember this from the movie JFK as well. One of the more famous stories of potential incompetency by an agency, whatever we would like to call it, we have the James Hostey situation. Now, I have a friend of mine that I coached college baseball with whose dad was an FBI agent, and he said there were the gunslingers in the FBI's and there were paper pushers. There were guys that were more comfortable hanging around the office and shuffling things from one file folder to the other. And they just, they weren't real cowboys out there with the firearm. They were just kind of comfortable in the office. And he kind of considered that was kind of that was the MO, or that was the depiction of Hostey, good office guy. But Hostey's the guy that in Dallas gets assigned, go chase Oswald around. And in his chase, he kept running into Marina, couldn't find Lee. So the famous story goes that a couple of weeks before the assassination, maybe 3 weeks before, he goes out, hey, Marina, where's Lee? He's not here right now, in broken English, if at all. She couldn't speak English, really. So he's like, well, hey, here's my card. James Hostey, FBI, call me when you can, Lee. Tell Lee to give me a call when he gets a chance. So the story goes that on November 8th, thereabout, 2 weeks before the assassination, a Lee Harvey Oswald comes into the Dallas field headquarters for the FBI, talks to a receptionist. Where's Hostey? He's out in the field. Well, you tell him, Lee said, give me a notebook. And then it's a question of years later, since this note gets destroyed, the receptionist says, if you don't stay away from this is what the receptionist says. She remembers the note saying, if you don't leave my wife alone, I'm going to blow up the building. Clearly a threat, right, of some magnitude. Hostey says later it was, if you don't stop harassing my wife, I'm going to go to the proper authorities, whatever the hell that means. But anyway, in one of the movies, I can't remember if it was Parkland. It was one of the latter movies in the last decade on the assassination. There's a scene, which apparently is pretty accurate. They're kind of in the bullpen of a lot of different FBI personnel with open desks, and you hear, typewriters in the background. And Gordon Shanklin, not G. Gordon, but Gordon Shanklin The director of that field office comes rolling out as depicted in the movie and yells at Hostey, "Hey, it's come to my attention that some Oswald character came by the office the other day and threatened you." And he's like, "Yeah, boss, buddy." He goes, "And you didn't go do anything about it?" And now Hostey gets defensive and says, "Man, if I chased down every fool that came in here and made a threat," he goes, "this one killed the president.
Oh, boy.
You didn't do anything." So now they're shouting at each other and Hostey's defensive. So fast forward 48 hours, they kill Oswald. So as depicted in the movie, this is supposed to be what happened. Shanklin says, "Hostey, get your ass in here." He comes in, he goes, "Hey, that note, get rid of it. But what about Oswald's dead? Get rid of the note." And he starts to like, "Not in here. Get the hell out of here." So he leaves and he's both tearing it up and lighting it on fire and flushing it down the toilet, but he gets rid of it.
Yeah.
So this story is not known until the mid-70s. Church Committee, Rockefeller Commission, one of those, I think it was Church. In one of those meetings, he gets called before and asked, "Is this true? Did you really have a note from Oswald that you destroyed?" And he goes, "Yes, I did." Now, I'd say that whole story to say, what's the driving force? Let's look at it this way. Let's look at it that the FBI is completely innocent, but bumbling and silly and bureaucratic like every other agency. And Hostey gets paid as much to hang out down at the burger joint, eat fries, and drink milkshakes as he would if he chases Oswald around. He's going to get paid the same, right? And you're probably not going through life thinking, if I don't snap or I don't really clamp down, this guy is going to shoot the president. You don't think all that. But when that president gets shot, you got a note where he threatened the FBI headquarters, or it was kind of a veiled threat. It was a very serious threat. It was whatever level of threat. And now he's dead. Could you imagine a boss saying, "Hey, we don't want J. Edgar back in Washington to know we screwed up this badly. Get rid of the note." That's all it could have been. Now, the conspiracy people jumped all over it. It was also discussed in the movie JFK that if the FBI hadn't been complicit in it, they would have brought forth the note to say, "See, Oswald's a crazy, he's a homicidal wreck. He could kill anybody. He's in here threatening us at the FBI." So what would be the reason to get rid of the note? They said it's because he was involved with them. I think it's very plausible it was more CYA from their boss. Like, I don't think they wanted Hoover to know that they had a threatening note from the presidential assassin, didn't do anything about it. So, I mean, could you see from a standpoint of working in an office like, oh, hell, that's egg on our face. And I think they were sweating it. And I think they were happy Oswald got killed because they got to brush it under the rug. Do I think it's possible Oswald had all these connections? I think he did. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't destroy the note for any other reason than egg on their face. And so it's the same thing with the CIA. I think all these years the CIA have been simply covering. If the American people knew that we knew this guy all along, we were recovering his mail, following him, and didn't do something to stop him, it makes us look bad. I think that's just a big part of it.
Yeah. Wow. That is a lot to unpack. This was just in the newly released files. All the stuff that you just mentioned, then?
No. The Hostey thing was released in the 70s.
Okay.
No. But what's come out recently is that James Jesus Angleton, who is this super spook, the one that was all into the CIA and all the clandestine stuff, the fact that he lied in the 70s, and so did Helms, the later Richard Helms, the director, they all lied about what they knew about Oswald. That's clear. They lied. They were in front of either congressional committees or either House or Senate. They were in front of committees where they clearly lied about their connection to Oswald. Connection to Oswald in the fact that they were chasing him all over the place and surveilling him. Now, what that means, what I think what it comes down to is either Lee Harvey Oswald is this nutty free agent out there for hire or whatever, even though he doesn't have two nickels to rub together. And on the psychology part too, I think he definitely takes the shot at General Walker in April, right after he gets the rifle, right? So if he's doing that, does that look like that's CIA orchestrated because months later he's going to kill Kennedy? Or is he a psycho guy trying to become famous in world affairs by shooting at people? I don't know. But he has the rifle, and we don't know again, sometimes even what his politics are. He has the summer in New Orleans. He's getting on TV and radio spots. He's out there one day telling these anti-Castro Cubans, I'm your boy, I'll help you out. The next day he's handing out pro-Castro leaflets, and they have this fight, which leads it into court. It's filmed somehow. It just so happens to be filmed, that he's out there struggling with these guys. He's handing out leaflets. So he's building a story. There's no doubt. Now, he could be this narcissistic guy that everybody says he is, and he's just into his own image, and he wants to be this great world leader, or he's an unknown greatness. He's just so super smart, and nobody gets how wonderful. I mean, and that's a lot of what his wife says. But here's what we know. He was very cheap. He was notorious for not spending money on anything. And so what he would do was often look at the newspaper that others had purchased 2 and 3 days before and left in the break area. The Dallas newspapers present for the first time for public knowledge. Monday's the 18th, Kennedy's in Florida, and he averts an attempt on his life there, or the Secret Service discovers something. November 2nd, earlier in the month, it was Chicago. Now it's Tampa. So on Monday, November 18th, he's in Tampa. Dallas newspapers on the 19th and 20th for the first time print for public consumption where the motorcade route is. So the argument is on the 20th or 21st, Oswald may have for the first time opened up the paper and goes, son of a gun, Kennedy's riding by here. He's riding right by the building. He had a 5-week history. 4 of the 5 weeks, he went to see his wife, Marina, who was staying with Ruth Paine in Irving. And he would go with Buell Wesley Frazier, who he worked with, whose sister had told Ruth Paine about the job in the first place. So he built this quasi-friendship with Buell Wesley Frazier, who's this 19-year-old kid who lives, and I've been there to both houses. It's like the Paine house, street running adjacent, and then this house that Lenny Mae Randall lived in, which is the sister of Buell Wesley Frazier, and he's sleeping on the couch with his older sister. So they had a pattern. Lee would call from his rooming house during the week where he rode the bus back and forth to work. They had a pattern and an understanding. Lee, if you want to come see Marina, because Ruth Paine wasn't especially fond of Lee, had to call first, had to get permission to come out with Buell Wesley Frazier on Friday evening. And then Buell Wesley Frazier would bring him back to work on Monday. Then it was bused back to the other rooming house. But he breaks that pattern on Thursday, November 21. He'd never done this. We're talking about 5 weeks, but he'd never even considered doing what he did. He goes to, and I say Buell Wesley because years ago it was Wesley Frazier. Now he's calling himself Buell. But so he goes to Frazier and he goes, hey, buddy, you want to give me a ride back to the house today, back to Irving, where your sister lives and where my wife is staying with her friend? And he goes, sure, Lee, you're always welcome to ride in my car. But wait a minute, Lee, it's Thursday. And he goes, yeah, what gives? And he said, I need to pick up some curtain rods. That would imply curtain rods for this 1026 North Beckley Avenue place where he's staying, which didn't need curtain rods. Curtains were neatly hanging in that room. He didn't need any curtain rods. And Ruth Paine had no curtain rods awaiting him. There was no discussion of that. So he shows up. Buell Wesley Frazier says, sure, Lee, you can ride home with me, and does, drops him off in the front yard before Ruth Paine gets back from the grocery store. So Marina's horrified. He shows up, hey, baby, I'm here. Let's go play with the kids in the front yard. She goes, what the hell are you doing here? You didn't call and ask? Yeah. Well, I decided to come over. So he's out in the front yard with June, the oldest, and some other neighborhood kids. And then Ruth Paine shows up. She's pulling groceries out of the car, and she looks at Marina, and Marina supposedly went, I'm terribly sorry. I don't know what that's about. And, the pain subsides as the evening goes on. So there's a little bit of Ed Sullivan watching TV. He was on Sunday night. But anyway, they're watching TV, going through the evening. And Marina brings up, boy, Jack Kennedy's in town. And kind of, I think, makes some suggestions. He's a handsome man or something. She says to the Warren Commission, he never said a negative thing about John F. Kennedy. But then, out of the clear blue, he starts to push that they reconcile and get back together. So he is, and she later admits that she, for the first time, had the power because she had a stable place to stay. Ruth was going to keep putting her up and the child. So She's like, nah, I'd like to think about it for a while. And he seems to be a little miffed by that. At that night, the last night he sleeps before he's arrested the next day, the last night of freedom, they stay together in the bedroom that Marina has. And she says in the middle of the night, she does kind of the footsie over on him to try to say some level of intimacy, and he kicks it away. And she's like, whoa, he's really pissed off. Okay, fine. So he gets up in the morning, goes, don't worry about breakfast. And she says later, it's like, as if, like, I'm going to get up to make you breakfast, but whatever. He makes a cup of instant coffee, grabs a package, heads to the car. Lindy Mae Randall sees him through the kitchen window as she's washing dishes and said, hey, Buell, what's going on with this guy? Oh, that's Lee. Well, he does something he doesn't normally do. He normally waits there at Ruth's house, gets picked up. Now he cuts across, comes to the car, throws a package in the back, and waits on Buell. So now Frazier comes out to the car and he goes, hey, Lee, what's in the car? And he goes, oh, yeah, those are the curtain rods I talked about. Well, he goes on to shoot Kennedy, let's say. What's interesting is when Marina gets up, she has a teacup that was given to her by, I can't remember, it was an aunt, grandmother, some female family relative had given her this very rare teacup as a gift. There's $174 in cash and his wedding band in it. So Marina always sort of argued, I'm not so sure if I had said to him, yes, Lee, let's get a new place. Let's start over as man and wife with child. And the other one was on the way. Well, actually, the second one had been born. Rachel's now like a month old. She was born in October. So during this time of him trying to get steady employment, his argument was, things are going well at the school book depository. Let's get our own place, move out from Ruth, come with me. She says no. And he goes, okay, screw it. I'll kill the president. Grabs the rifle, which he may have been indifferent to doing. And then he leaves the cash and the ring. Now, a friend of mine that I have that's crazy smart. He's got a PhD from UVA in foreign affairs. He's done a lot of investigation into this. And Oswald's arrested with $13 and change. It's like a 5 and 8 ones and some change. He is known to have spent $1 on the cab ride he had he gets on a bus, that gets mired in traffic. He gets off the bus and has a gentleman named Whaley drive him by cab and asked to be taken to the 500 block of North Beckley Avenue when he knows he lives at 1026. So the argument some have given is he gets a glance, says, have the cops gotten here yet? Oh, no, it's clear. Yeah, leave me right here. Then he backtracks to 5 blocks, also as to not be able to have Whaley know later where he actually lives. So he lies about 5, makes sense. But the whole argument here is what has been argued is he may have been indifferent to doing it all. He comes in that weekend. He finds out about the possibility of shooting Kennedy. And on Thursday, he has his chance to go in. If Marina says, let's go back together, he's got the job. Things are getting better. He just doesn't do it. He leaves the rifle in the garage and goes on about his life. But when she denies him, now he's upset enough to say, I got nothing else. Why don't I go ahead and shoot Kennedy? So back to my friend. He says with the $13 and change he has left, he does a deep dive into what would that have gotten you in November of 63? What it would have gotten him by bus is back to Mexico. That was just enough. So there has to be something strategic in leaving her 174 and not every dollar. Or, why not 20? Why not 5? Why some number? So my friend truly believes he knew he had to go on the run. He didn't really have a plan of escape because it's all hatched in his mind in 24 hours. And there is some randomness in it all that does kind of suggest that. And the randomness part too, that again kind of bothers me with people, because when you're in that window, it's a big line in the movie JFK. Why did you just shoot him down Elm Street? I'll ask you. I'm sorry, Houston Street. When Kennedy makes the turn on Main onto Houston and starts to drive right at the school book depository, I'm just spitballing here. I'll ask you, what do you think would be a good reason why Oswald wouldn't have fired that shot?
Down Houston Street.
Yeah, right down Houston Street.
I don't remember how exactly the geography of the area goes, and I've never actually visited there either. I'm gonna say that
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No. You're fine. You're fine. I'm gonna say it's like
the car's driving right at you.
Okay. I guess it would have been a lot easier to pinpoint him as the shooter.
I totally agree with that. Amen, brother. I'm like, I look at that when cars come in, and it was in the movie JFK. Costner's like, well, actually, I think it was his assistant's like, one thing, boss, I never understood. Why didn't you just shoot him coming right at you? And I'm like, how about first shot, everybody looks right up at you?
Yeah.
You have this whole Secret Service with a really great vantage point to shoot directly up at you to stop you. You got a windshield. You've got drivers. You got John Connolly sitting right in front of Kennedy. Now he rounds the turn on Elm and begins to slowly drive away in a lane and tunnel. Who's at the very back of the car? Kennedy. And now his whole back is exposed.
Yeah.
Whereas before, you have Connolly basically obscuring the shot and a windshield. And I just think when you're there and you try to envision, 12:30 Central Standard Time that day, you'd be like, damn, if I take this shot, I'm going to get a hail of bullets straight up at me from all the people that look up and go, shooter, right there. There he is. Whereas when he turned and started to go down Elm Street, now there's this funnel shot going away. And I think it led to far more confusion. So again, there's just a series of things that people scream out. Well, he would have shot him coming directly. I'm like, I do? Why do I know that? Why does that seem like a better shot? And why? But that becomes a whole argument of, damn well he didn't shoot him in a funnel shot going away at a low rate of speed where he's in the back of the car with nothing obscuring him from the shot. No, I would never take that shot. I'm going to shoot through the windshield, other passengers, and straight down into a funnel of Secret Service agents and cops. That's what I'm going to do. But that gets passed off as like, well, clearly the whole thing's a lie because he would have fired down Houston Street. Like, I mean, really?
That's because they already have the idea of how it all happened, so they're just trying to, make everything sound, or trying to make it sound like, well, this is the way that I think it happened, so I have to make sure I make, this is the reason that such and such happened, so that it can comport with my worldview on things, or with how I felt the Kennedy assassination happened. That's an interesting. Or obviously there's quite a few interesting points you had there. Real quick, because I'm not sure. I mean, I'm okay on time. I don't know if you.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, so give me a few. How about maybe not necessarily three, but like, what are several of the biggest findings specifically from the newly released files that you think people should know about?
Well, the one thing they talk about is the Underwood story. He was the guy with the CIA ties. It was not CIA to my knowledge. I think he had some type of military or background, but he is the one that came out and said rogue members of the CIA told his friends, he made this trip, I believe it was from DC to New Jersey. He goes running to his friends and says, I'm in great danger. They just shot the president, rogue members of the CIA. And I'm in danger. 6 months later, he dies of a suicide, shot to the back of his head with the wrong hand. It's like behind left ear, and he's right-handed. Like that type of thing happened.
Right.
That is getting kicked around a lot. That why did this guy have a fear after the shooting? Why is he named the CIA and then he's dead? And it seems to be apparent suicide. It's ruled suicide. Doesn't make sense. The James Jesus Angleton again. The movie Matt Damon, The Good Shepherd. You remember seeing that?
I've not seen it. No.
All right, that's what that's based on. Angleton's who the movie's based on.
Okay.
So you see with Angleton, he's Yale, connected type of guy, connected family type of guy, establishment type of people. Goes to Yale, Skull and Bones. He's secret society type. And then he goes off to World War II, and he works highly in military intelligence. So it is aspects of military intelligence post-World War II that become the CIA. And I think that what we're finding is, as a nation, that post-World War II world, in part, I think part of what Eisenhower was warning about, the military-industrial complex, came from an idea that we were now the world leader and the policeman of the world, all those kind of cliche type of definitions, but I think they're true, that we have to make policy everywhere. And that the CIA originally was supposed to offer to the president that type of high-end intelligence at this highest level, so that the policymakers, which are supposed to be civilian, the president's not supposed to be a military dictator. It's supposed to be a civilian government that puts the military into actions in times of military need, not the other way around. The military shouldn't be running it all. But what eventually happened is the CIA began to see, oh, well, if we infiltrate this country and we monkey around with its elections, we get the leader we need. And that's going to be especially important to U.S. corporations and this type of business and that type of business. And this is all good for America. It keeps America running. And they go into propaganda, and it becomes not only running elections, but running media and markets and all of this, and infiltrating. And we don't like that leader, even if democratically elected by the people, he has to go. We'll put our own person in. So that starts to happen. And I think that what we started to see with the Church Commission and the Rockefeller Commission, or I'm sorry, Church Committee and Rockefeller Commission, Frank Church, Idaho, big part of what we were finding in the 70s is the CIA had in large part done the same in the United States. So I think that we're starting to see unravel is the ABC, CBS, NBC that we grew up with. Well, I'm much older than you are, but what I grew up with, 3 stations and maybe a UHF from the local largest city, that they were lying to us all along. And it's been so accelerated in these last few years. I mean, I know you've seen the same montages I have, but they're unbelievable, where they will have talking heads on all the major networks saying the exact same thing in unison to the degree they can play these overlapping videos. And they're saying the same. That can't be by accident. Now, maybe it's a political party. Maybe it's certain political influence that's telling everybody in the media to say the same thing, or maybe there's more. And I think that part of what came out in the 70s investigations is how much influence the CIA namely had on everyday American culture, what we were having taught to us and how we were supposed to perceive the world. And it moved from, and even that being questionable, how it was there to influence and shape foreign countries into being into the United States, which it clearly was not. There is a lot of literature to show that Harry Truman, I believe, even said the dumbest thing I ever did was allow the CIA to be started, to become what it has become. He had questions about the Kennedy assassination accordingly. Now you go Eisenhower, 5-star general. You go from Truman, who's there at the end of the war and is there at the formation of the CIA, and then questions his formation. Think about it. You got Eisenhower coming in and saying, I question the role of the military-industrial complex in daily life. You have Kennedy that looks to apparently dismantle the CIA, has certainly other views of the Soviet Union and de-escalating nuclear involvement or potential war weapons and things like that. And he gets assassinated. Then you have Johnson, who is, I think his role in the Senate was the Armed Services Committee, and he made massive amounts of money. And some of the things that you see in some of the documentaries are interesting. This is quite interesting. Bell, and it's addressed in the movie JFK. Bell Helicopter apparently was a Fort Worth, Texas-based industry that was on the verge of bankruptcy. And then they made the Huey helicopter. Thousands of them were lost in Vietnam. You might go, tragic no, it's not tragic for them. They just keep pumping them out. If they're getting shot down left and right in Vietnam and we're losing soldiers and helicopters, that's good for business for them. So they go from almost bankruptcy, and they've got some friends in Texas with Lyndon Johnson, to saving the business by having a big U.S. contract for manufacture of these helicopters to go to Vietnam. And guess who actually worked for that organization? Ruth Paine's husband, Michael. And Michael was Northeastern establishment money with the trust fund. He's married to Ruth Paine, a Quaker from Pennsylvania. They end up in Dallas. They become the handlers of the Oswalds to some degree. And Michael just so happens to move out under issues of strains within the marriage, about time for Marina to move in. Then after the assassination and Ruth and Marina speak no more, he moves back in. I don't know what that means, but I find it fascinating that Michael Paine, husband of Ruth Paine, happens to work for Bell Helicopter and is pretty well off. I think it's like he has in his lineage, I believe one who from Massachusetts signed a declaration. Like he's Northeastern establishment. He's in Dallas. He's working for Bell Helicopter, and his wife just happens to take in Marina Oswald after meeting her at a party. I know how that looks to everybody. I mean, it could be a dice roll. It could be like, hey, what the hell? You know, you just happen to meet these people. But it does seem a little bit orchestrated. But on the other hand, back to some of the conspiracy stuff, I remember doing a show when I was doing radio in Norfolk, and I come in one day, and my friend, the Marine, he was like, you got another Kennedy nut, take over. I'm getting the hell out of here. And he just left me to do the show. And the guy was pretty famous in the whole conspiracy world. And there came a time in the discussion, he's not David Lifton that wrote the book Best Evidence, which was the whole body alteration argument, that Kennedy's head had to be surgically altered to show up the fact that the shot wasn't from behind, it was from the front. So I got him on the air and I said, you were pretty cocksure that the only guy in Dallas that you absolutely know without question was innocent was Oswald. And he was kind of like, well, I wouldn't say all that. I'm like, okay, but Oswald didn't know anything about it. No, absolutely not. Poor Lee knows nothing. I get into the thing. He could have been on the street waving at Jack and Jackie, you know, but then I said, let me ask you this. Headshots from the front, right? He goes, absolutely. So I said, you got these 5 conspirators in a room. It's always a smoke-filled room. They're smoking, but they're sitting down and they're like, Jack Kennedy's got to die. Got it, Chief. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. How are we going to do it? All right. We got this sap Oswald. Yeah. He's going to be in a window from up and behind. Only he's not going to know it because he's going to be on the street or somewhere else. Okay, I got you. All right. And then he's going to fire the headshot. No, Chief, better than that. What? We're going to shoot from the front. Really? Yeah, we're going to shoot from the front and pin it on the guy from behind. Okay, this is the plan. We're going to fire from the front. Yeah, Chief. We're going to fire from the front and pin it on the guy from behind. Is that going to lead to some problem? No. When we're flying them back from Dallas, we're going to have surgeons aboard the plane. They're going to alter the head. And I would think, like, wouldn't it just be easier to pin it on the guy from the front? No, Chief. We're going to pin it on the guy that doesn't fire a shot, who's in the window he doesn't know. And and I'm asking the guy, I'm like, do you really think that in this high-level assassination conspiracy, you fired from the wrong location? And he gets into some BS about like, well, he'd missed the tunnel and the shot had, I'm like, but dude, you don't even have a guy from above and behind. You got a patsy from above and behind, but why the hell would you shoot or fire the fatal shot from where it could have been discovered? You got all these witnesses that thought it was a frontal shot. Why would you pin it on the guy from behind and fire the fatal headshot from the front? And, you know, he hems and haws and says all kinds of things. If you start pinning things on people and you don't know their whereabouts, you don't know how ironclad an alibi they might have. So when all the people are saying all the things about what they know Oswald's going to do and what he didn't do, or in that circumstance I talked about earlier, he doesn't even know this is being pinned on him, then you really can't control his movements or actions if you don't have absolute control over him. You'd almost have to be in on the murder. Like when you know he doesn't have a clear alibi, that's the time you execute the murder because you know he doesn't have the alibi. But if you don't know where he is or anything, it's very dangerous to start building a case against somebody that you don't even know where they're located at the time of the murder or whatever offense there is. That's a little bit risky behavior for me. But anyway, yeah, the whole thing about the Kennedy assassination as I started, I think it just all comes down to this. I think it happened one way, single shooter Oswald. And I think Oswald is anywhere between wanted Marina back and she said no and decided to do it, all the way to, it gets back to the CIA thing. Either they told him point blank to do it, they mind controlled him into doing it. It's some variation, but I think the most likely is he did do it because I don't think so much about him being crazy. I don't think he was crazy. I do think, well, okay. I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't want to get into the definitional phrases of craziness, but I do think he was homicidal. I do think taking the shot at Edwin Walker would prove he pulled a knife in his youth against his stepbrother's wife. When he was like 13 years old, he pulled a knife and waved at her and was attempting to stab her. So he had some violent tendencies.
And he also
clearly
murdered a police officer shortly after the Kennedy assassination, J.D. Tippit.
Yeah, and I think the difference on that one, if all true, and I think it is, the difference on that one, the reason I don't include that, yanking a knife out and kind of waving at somebody gives a certain amount of meanness or, homicidal nature. The fact that he would shoot at Walker, maybe he's fighting for some kind of political recognition, worldwide recognition, whatever. Shooting Kennedy, probably the same. I think the one difference with Tippit might have been mere survival in the moment.
Right.
It does, you're right. It'll show he'll kill somebody. But I think that was like, this guy just stopped me. He's on to me. I got to shoot him. Boom,
right.
He's dead. Now I go running. And that's another thing that a lot of people on the conspiracy side don't want to admit. If these cops did go into the Texas theater and arrest him, his first action was to pull the firearm and try. He goes, I guess it's all over now, swings at an officer, punches at an officer, and then pulls his handgun and attempts. And there was Officer McDonald that reaches, and the argument is the hammer drops right there on the webbing of his hands, what keeps the firearm from going off. But he definitely pulls the firearm, the same firearm that he killed Tippit with, and tries to shoot another cop. These are not the actions of an innocent man. I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would go a little bit more quietly if you were gonna protest your innocence, you would think, at least. Yeah, I mean, definitely a mentally disturbed man, I guess, at least.
Well, yeah. Again, mentally disturbed. Yeah, I mean, God knows there's so many definitions out now. We kind of look back at history and we project all of this should have been, could have been, would have been, or was this person of this particular nature? I don't know. Recently I saw a study on, and I think it's just way overused term for whatever degree, narcissism. And, when you get in a textbook definition, we haven't had a world leader yet that wasn't a narcissist, right? I mean, because there has to be a certain amount of what we're doing right now, I'm sure shows some degree of narcissism. What the hell are we doing on, sitting and recording ourselves so other people might listen?
Right.
I think it's right, but I think it's entertaining. But if you look at the backgrounds of the way things used to be, now people are easily famous too easily, I guess, because it was a more limited opportunity for that. I remember telling some kids in a class 10 years ago, I'm like, guys, you don't really know what big is anymore because the things that, like I said, my mom would not have really approved of Madonna, but Madonna in the 80s was as big as it gets, as was Michael Jackson. Yeah. And I said, there was a time in American history, ABC, CBS, NBC, everybody watched the Ed Sullivan Show. And I said, look at the lineage. You got Elvis, you got the Beatles, you have all these people that came on Ed Sullivan on the Monday morning water cooler talk. We talked about the same things. And then no comedian really made it until they went through Johnny Carson, right? And they're kind of not, who the hell's Johnny Carson? I said, it's exactly what I'm talking about. I get it that you're in a different era.
A lot of them don't even know who Jay Leno is now.
True.
Who
and I
think grew up with.
Right. And you're at the tail, but you grew up in that world. Then that was just legacy handed off. That was still kind of the same world.
Yeah.
We knew who all the celebrities were, but you felt like as a kid, at least in my era, you wanted to play professional football, Major League Baseball. You might want to be a stand-up comic, but you had to go through the channels to become famous. But that's a few people in an executive boardroom deciding, not the masses deciding. So, you put stuff out there in the market, things can blow up and people can be, they're going to be entertained by whatever. But what I was saying about Madonna being big, we had no way around that. She's doing the Pepsi commercial. She's on everything. Michael Jackson had that same kind of bigness. And we just I don't think we have a common culture enough that, I'm still coaching baseball in my advanced age. So I'm around kids and I hear a little bit. But I was in the bullpen yesterday. Great story. I was in the bullpen, and for whatever reason, the guy that's running our PA, running our announcement stuff, plays Billy Joel Piano Man. And one of the kids is like, why are we listening to sad stuff? Why are we? I said, well, funny you should say that. It is actually a song about a piano player in a bar and having these people that are aging and, drinking too much, asking them to play some song from their past.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but you've never heard of Billy Joel. They're like, Coach, I don't know what you're talking about. We need different music than that. And I thought, yeah, it really wasn't baseball appropriate, but I'm hearing music, and I'll ask them every once in a while, do you know what that is? And 99 times out of 100, they don't. But then some kids listen to nothing but 80s. Kids. They think the 80s music was the best.
Old
And
souls.
I think it's really, though, because I come from a certain age, though, I also think I saw an article recently that said if you think the music in the 80s was better, you're right. It was more complex, the lyrics were better, and the artists were better. And I don't know. I'll mention to kids every chance I get. Have you ever seen Prince? Or I'll pull out some Prince and they're like, damn, that guy's amazing. And I'm like, yeah, that's Prince. And some kids have never heard of him. And to me, that's like, how do you not know Prince?
My personal favorite era is 90s and 2000s, but I kind of see it like with video games too, and
Yeah.
sports in general. It's like, oh well, the from my era it was the best. It's like, well, I mean, yeah, it was what you grew up with, but also when those eras go by, we tend to forget the crap that was there, because I mean, there's a lot of bad music today, but there was also a lot of bad music back then. But also, it's a lot easier to get that stuff out. Kind of like what you were talking about with podcasts. Probably
Yeah.
a little bit too much gatekeeping back then, but there was also fewer ways to get yourself out there. Now it's arguably some people that probably shouldn't be having shouldn't be getting their voice out there. They can, but I mean, it's obviously it's their right. But sometimes, some people maybe shouldn't be so loud and obnoxious about their viewpoints. But I don't know. Maybe some people think the same thing about me. So it helps to have a little bit of self awareness. But real quick, I do want to get back to
Yeah.
one more. Let's see. But time for one more JFK question, and then I'm going to end with
Yeah.
the random question. Was there anything in particular that you were disappointed to find out wasn't in the newly released files? I mean, obviously there's some stuff that was still redacted, and obviously we'd love to see every single thing be released. But anything in particular you were wanting to see and you didn't see, and you're like, well, I would have liked to have had that.
No, because, and it's an interesting point. I appreciate that that question, because I've been asked that, like, teaching the class, like, well, coach, I mean, or students that call me coach, they're like, coach, what do you want to see happen? I'm like, I want to see that Kennedy didn't die the way he did, but I can't change that. So now, I don't know. I just want to get as close to the truth as possible. I'm not looking for an outcome at all. So
Right.
when I support the argument that I think Oswald acted alone, that doesn't give me glee. It doesn't give me glee. Is there always a certain amount of when you argue with people about it, you want to be more right than they are? Sure. But my point again about that type of, I think Oswald did it, that's where I am. What I talked about earlier, kind of the irritant or the irritating point sometimes is when I hear people, like I said, when I hear people say, like, well, damn well, a bullet doesn't pass through a person and hit another person. I'm like, based upon what? Like, I hear that over and over. People go, single bullet theory is the craziest thing I've ever heard. You know that bullets what? That a bullet penetrates 40 plus inches of pine board and it can't pass through a human? What the hell do you know about this?
Yeah.
How do you know? Do you know about a bullet going in the yaw, flipping end over end? So again, it's back to, if the single bullet theory is correct and Oswald is potentially the shooter, we go forward from there. But if your start is always, I know the single bullet theory doesn't work, and I know that people don't shoot presidents and run and kill cops. I know. Based upon what? Now, if you come up to, hey, look, you come up tomorrow, I swear before all things sacred, you come up tomorrow and you got the babushka lady firing the shots, or you got the guy with the umbrella firing it. And I do think it's awfully, do I believe the photographs with the more dark complected man seems to have a radio in his back pocket and he's talking, and he and the umbrella guy are hanging out in Dealey Plaza and sitting there on the curb after the shooting seems kind of strange? Yes, it does. The fact that a guy raises an umbrella right as the shooting starts is bizarre. Yes, it is. I don't know what the hell that is. And I do know the guy standing beside him with the fist raised. They go on to sit together. And when that guy who goes before the House Select Committee says he's the umbrella guy, I don't know who the other guy was. Really? You seem pretty chummy with him. You're sitting there together at the curb. You don't flee the scene of the assassination, or at least move away from what just happened. You kind of sit there like you're waiting on handlers. I don't know what the hell any of that means. But if you show me tomorrow that there is, or there were multiple shooters and there's a shot from another location, I'll tell you another thing that disturbs me. It absolutely disturbs me. I guess it was Amazon Prime, one of these just released finally from 10 years ago. They have all the doctors that have now passed away from Parkland. I don't know if you've seen this. They're sitting, and I've seen it a million times. Every time they're interviewed, they put their hands in the back part of their head and say, "That's the exit. The exit was back here. Exit's back here." Now, the one thing I find interesting about that is many of the doctors, I believe, I think it's been pretty much substantiated, sort of overly, or they've been a little bit out of bounds with how much they say they actually knew and how much support there really is for that. Often because of the relative position they had in the room. They didn't really get a good look at his head, but I always thought too, I'll ask you, what do you think was probably his position to the gurney or stretcher when he came in?
I don't know, face up.
If he's face up, what's he lying on? I'm just spitballing here, but I'm thinking he's lying on the very part of the head that they're all saying was blown out.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Right. And I'm just saying now, I've seen the autopsy photographs, and there, the ones that have been published, he's got a metal, almost like a little bracket on some kind of protruding piece that holds the back of the head. And you see all of this laid open and laid back. It's a mess. It's a 5-6 inch in diameter hole in his head.
Yeah.
So when they pull that flap forward, you see that one photograph of an entry right in the back center of his head. There's a flap. I've wondered, were they misinterpreting things because the flap laid back and this part of his head was exposed and open, and in their mind's eye, they went back of head? I'm just saying, you're not going to be able to identify an exit wound hole in the back center portion of the head if he's lying on it. And no one said he was picked up. They never examined for the back wound. They didn't know about the back wound in Parkland. They did the tracheotomy over this front wound, which looked to be neat and circular like an entrance wound. My understanding is when they examined the collar of the shirt and the tie, clearly the nick in the tie and the exit from the shirt was out from the throat, which would indicate a shot from the back. Now, originally, the Dr. Malcolm Perry said this looked like an entry wound. There is a doctor who ran a series of tests. He took animal carcasses, I can't remember particularly which one, but he tightened in the area where the collar was, and you got more of a neat exit wound than you normally get when there's no supportive clothing around it. I don't know. The argument is, according to this Dr. John Latimer, maybe the reason the throat wound was more neat and circular was the actual support of the surrounding collar, because what we know is the bullet clipped right where that top button is and also nicked the tie, but from the interior of the knot in the tie. Didn't come in from the front, it came out. So let's say that's what happened. When they're doing the life-saving procedures on Kennedy, they're looking at his eyes, some portion of the top of his head, and a wound here. They don't even know about the wound in the back. So when they get to Parkland, they're looking for when they get to Bethesda to do the autopsy, they have a hole in his back, and they're trying to find an exit. And they work in a slight bit, and they think that they get to the point where this tunnel has ended. And they assume the bullet went in, and that's the one that fell back on the stretcher that became the single bullet theory bullet. Then they have a tracheotomy in the front, the hole in the back. Then they call Parkland, and they're like, yeah, we see where you did that tracheotomy. They're like, yeah, over a bullet wound. And they're like, what? Yeah, there was a wound in the front. Oh, really? So they don't know this. So now they go, well, wait a minute. Maybe the reason with all the x-raying and searching we couldn't find a bullet is because that bullet wound in the back exited the throat. They're spitballing, they're guessing because they've obliterated this wound. And now they have this wound in Bethesda. In Dallas, they only see this, that they make the tracheotomy over, and they never look at the back. And it's a mess. His body's a mess. What was the destruction of his head was awful. Here on, oh gosh, what is the Nova channel does a thing 10, 15 years ago. It might have been the 50th anniversary. And they take a high level headshot medical expert, does this type of work, examination of headshots, wounds. And they get, according to this special that they put up together, he gets special permission from the Kennedy family to go in and see all the photographs. And it's interesting. He shows this, I'll use my fist here. He shows this x-ray of the skull, and he goes, look right here. You see this point of entry? What we expect is all of these radiating fractures, and you see them. You see, like, it looks like rivers. It looks like streams coming out. And he goes, and then there's concentric cracks or fractures that you get to run along it. And they're like, what are you saying? That he goes, that shot was in the dead center back of his head, and it created all these fractures out. It also created a massive amount of pressure in the head. So when the bullet exited and blew out all of that matter from the top of his head, the backward movement of his head is one explanation for it. And Dr. Pepper Jenkins, who was at the head of the gurney over Kennedy, he said, you can find it on YouTube. He's been dead 15, 20 years, I guess, but sometime probably in the late 90s, he spoke at this event and said, we were shocked to see what Kennedy wore, meaning the back apparatus. It was unbelievable. It was up to his sternum. It was wrapped at the lower half of his body with 6-inch ace bandages, figure-eighted through his thighs, onto both thighs and his lower back to put together this big, huge apparatus that was completely strapped to him to support his back. So he was asked that question. Seeing the Zapruder film, what's your take? And he goes, well, you can see after that first shot, he's, I don't want to use the term sitting duck, but he is totally defenseless. He's up. He's got what has been considered an involuntary reaction to the shot, but he can't move. I always wondered Jackie's position on that. And in the movie with Natalie Portman playing Jackie, I think from 2016, they addressed the interviews she did with Theodore White, the writer, and they said she would sit with anyone and discuss the gruesome details of the shooting. And as depicted in the movie, there's a point where she says to White, she goes, I just never understood, why didn't I pull him down? And I always wondered, did she really agonize? Because when Kennedy raises his arms, she grabs his left elbow and sort of pulls him towards her. He's leaning towards her. And there's that look in her eye like, what is going on with you? What's happening to you? Bam, headshot. And then, whoa. And I think if you look closely, a big part of that rearwardness of Kennedy is she pushes because she has him in support. What would you do if someone's head exploded in front of you? You would push them back. She clearly extends her arms. So he has that slight bit of when the head is struck, there's a movement forward. Then he goes violently back. But back to Dr. Jenkins. He's like, there's no way he could have gone down from that shot. There's no way he could have gone forward. So he felt like because of the apparatus with a back brace up to his sternum, when he was hit, there was brain tissue thrown out. There's a reverse jet effect theory. There is her reaction of pushing him. But the biggest thing is he just kind of bounced against that brace and fell backwards. And then he just went straight back. And I think that's what happened. So the headshots from behind as well to address that. So if the single bullet theory works, the headshots from behind, Marilyn Sitzman said nothing from the grassy knoll. You add it up, you add it up, you add it up. Oswald did it. Now, again, I don't have any kind of I hope or pray or anything like that. I do hope, I will say this, I do hope if there's something that can be learned from all of this that makes people more skeptical of government, the message they receive, I'm all for that. I'm definitely all for that, waking people up. But if COVID didn't do that for a lot of people, I don't know what else would either. That scared the hell out of me. And it still continues to scare me now. When I heard medical doctors saying they were trying to treat people to save them and they were being shut down from taking what seemed to be very reasonable courses of action to save human beings, and they couldn't say things, man, you're a much younger man than I am, but I always thought that that was kind of the American thing. Like, yeah, you can say the most crazy thing you want to say, but you can say it. And when people were saying things that I thought made a lot of sense and they were being shut down, that got pretty scary. And it wasn't just about COVID. It's been many other things as well. And yeah, these last 10 years have been scary. And I think we might be lulled into thinking we're coming out of it the other side with a greater degree of freedom, but I don't know that. I really don't. And that scares the hell out of me.
Well, I do think, because obviously, like I said before, I try not to take one side or the other, but I do think that we do see there's a lot of people saying that they support the freedom of speech and freedom of opinion, and whenever they're encountering something that is not them, and this is a problem all across the political spectrum, I feel,
Totally agree.
is a lot of people say they support the freedom of speech, the freedom of opinion and all that, but a lot of times their actions dictate otherwise, and it is a shame. We need to be able to say, things that are on our mind. Well, um, as much as I could continue this conversation, though,
Yeah.
we do got to wrap things up. So,
Yes, sir.
uh, one final question to make this a little bit more uplifting and fun. Actually, going to change the question a little bit. Like I said at the beginning, I always like to have a random question for our guests, and sometimes even when I'm just doing an episode just on my own. But since you're a sports guy, particularly with baseball, I'll keep it more on baseball, even though baseball's not my main forte. Football and basketball are, but we'll keep it at baseball since you are a pitching coach. So, random question today is: what is the greatest pitching performance you have ever personally witnessed, whether on TV or in person?
Oh, I think the greatest pitching performance, although I only saw it on TV, was Kerry Wood, 98 with the 20 strikeouts. He gave up one hit, and that was almost close, I think, to being an error. But I think it was what infield single, and he struck out 20. I think that's the most
Who
dominant
did he
start.
play for again?
Cubs.
Cubs. Okay, 98.
Yeah, Kerry Wood was a
Oh,
young
that's right.
kid,
Yeah.
right out of Texas. I think that's the most dominant performance. The most dominant guy I've ever seen in person. Actually, the guy up on the top up here, I think if I get the picture up here high enough, Josh Roop is a kid that grew up with me from his time he was 11 doing lessons. I don't know if it goes up high enough to see that, but I got a picture of him up top.
Okay.
Josh's first game with the Texas Rangers, he threw against Felix Hernandez. And Felix Hernandez, I sat dead center behind home plate, Arlington, Texas, September 16th, 2005. Everybody can look that up. So Josh gets the win in a 5-3 game. He left up 5-2. They won 5-3. But Felix Hernandez had the most incredible raw stuff I've ever seen. I mean, just fastball, velocity, curveball. I had Justin Verlander on a fall ball team. He's from Goochland, Virginia, west of Richmond, and he played on a travel team with us his senior year. There were times I saw him throw at Old Dominion University before he went on to be drafted. And I saw him
Wow. Okay.
sometimes.
I didn't know you went there.
Yeah, he went to Old Dominion. And I saw him in the high 90s a few times in college. I don't know that I ever got a chance to see him pitch in the big leagues or after he went up. I've totally lost touch with him, but I had him on a fall ball team. So I saw him throw incredibly well. But yeah, I think the most dominant start maybe anybody's ever had was Kerry Wood in that game against the Astros, who were a great hitting team. And Biggio was on that team, and Derek Bell was on that team. It was a bunch of Bs. And Jeff Bagwell, they were the
Okay.
guys that's the guys he struck out 20 against.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a guy in sports in general. I mean, I like a moderate amount of scoring. Like if it's a football game, 24-21 is good. I don't want no scoring whatsoever. But when people also want just offense, I think that's kind of boring too. I like offense and defense actually being competent. If it's just great defense and offense is doing what they can. They just can't make any scoring happen. I'm fine with that. I don't want it to be incompetent offense, but so whenever I see like a really good like pitching duel like that, I think that's really cool. Or same thing with football, basketball, hockey. If it's just great defense, but then you have some good offensive plays here and there, I personally enjoy that. Uh, but anyways, we have got to wrap things up. So Jack Moore, Mr. Moore, thank you so much for coming on and talking with to me about the JFK files. Real quick, any more or any media that you want to highlight, such as your podcast, anything else?
Yeah, everything I do, you can find at my name, MOORE, to consider.com. I'm doing spots on YouTube, Rumble. This Thursday, I have a friend of mine from the Dominican Republic, and I got another buddy of mine from the Dominican Republic that are close friends, and we're going to talk about baseball, international stuff, about how my friend Gil, that will be on there with me, grew up in a neighborhood within a square 5 mile or like a 5 mile radius. There's 4 Hall of Famers, 200 some All-Star games among those guys. It's crazy,
Wow.
that talent level. Yeah, so I love the DR. All my Dominican buddies in baseball have been the greatest people to associate with. Love these guys. And so we're going to do some baseball shows, and part of our segment is going to be more or less. So we're going to do spots. We're going to go Aaron Judge, home runs. How many this year? 60, more or less, 55, more. We're just going to come up and have some fun with that and talk about the game and try to talk about the past a lot too. Some of the greatest players of all time that have played. And gonna try to get some guys on. I have some friends that play in the big leagues here and there, so we're gonna try to get some guys on to talk about their experiences. But yeah, YouTube, Rumble, anything you want to look for with me, more to consider.com. And I appreciate that opportunity to tell everyone.
You got it. All right. You heard the man, more to consider.com, and go check out all his stuff he just talked about. For me, my links in the show notes, Facebook, Paul Rader, author and speaker, my LinkedIn, my book I self-published, Why Independents Rarely Win Elections and How They Become More Competitive, on Amazon and ebook and paperback format. My 5-day educational email course about polarization and how we can all help to mitigate it. And I think that's about it. But other than that, that is going to wrap things up for today. So as always, thank you all so much for listening. Until next time, take care.